But I want to start by asking you a question, one that many of us avoid because it's deceptively simple. Who owns your morning? Not in theory, not in some ideal version of your life, but right now, today, who's in charge of your first hour when you wake up? For too many people, the answer is no one, or worse, everything else. The phone buzzes, emails scream, notifications beg for attention, the world starts shouting before we've even taken a breath. And just like that, the first moment of our day, the one that should be ours, is handed over to the noise. This isn't just about distractions, it's about ownership. You see, the true power of a morning routine has nothing to do with checking off a list of healthy habits. It's not about green smoothies or journaling or hitting the gym at 5 a.m. Those things are great, sure. But that's not the point. The point is this: a morning routine is about reclaiming your space before the world takes it from you. We live in a time where attention is currency. Every app, every ad, every platform is designed to win a slice of your focus. That's not evil, it's just business. But we need to understand what it means. Because if you're not choosing where your attention goes, someone else is. And the morning, that sacred window before the world wakes up, is the one time of day when we still have a shot at being fully present. It's the only moment that hasn't been hijacked yet. The power of a morning routine isn't in the action. It's in the intention. I met a leader once. Let's call him James. He was responsible for a large team, ran multiple businesses, had a young family, and yet he always seemed calm, not in a detached way, in a deeply grounded way. I asked him one day what his secret was. He smiled and said, "I win the first hour of my day." That was it, that simple. But of course, it wasn't really simple at all. James explained that every morning, before he touched his phone, before he spoke to anyone, before his calendar started dictating his choices, he carved out time to think, not to do, to be. Sometimes he wrote, sometimes he walked, sometimes he just sat with a cup of coffee, but it was his hour, his terms, his mind, his heart. No noise, no demands. And here's what stuck with me. If I don't claim that space, he said, I become a reaction to everyone else's needs. But if I do, if I begin my day by choosing myself, I show up better for everyone else. We've created a culture that glorifies hustle, that worships busy, that tells us we're not doing enough unless we're overwhelmed. And yet the people we admire most, the ones who seem to lead with clarity, presence, and strength, they've learned to master the art of pause. Not because they're lazy, because they understand that in stillness we find direction. A morning routine is not about efficiency. It's not a tactic for squeezing more into your day. It's about starting your day with a declaration, I am in control of how I begin. That one decision to take ownership of the first hour sends a message to your brain, I matter, my thoughts matter. And that message compounds. Day after day, it becomes a pattern, then a rhythm, then a belief. And eventually it shapes how you lead, how you connect, how you handle stress, and how you pursue your goals. It becomes the foundation for something far bigger than just a routine. It becomes the architecture of a centered life. Let me be clear, I'm not saying you need to wake up at 4 a.m. and meditate for an hour while drinking lemon water. I'm not interested in selling an image. This isn't about the optics of routine. It's about the ownership of intention. Whether you have 10 minutes or 60, the principle is the same. Start on purpose, not by accident. There's something powerful about doing the same few things every morning, especially when the rest of life is chaotic. It creates a sense of certainty, a kind of quiet inner confidence. It tells you, no matter what happens today, I began in alignment with who I want to be. And in a world that pulls us in 1,000 directions, that anchor can be everything. Because let's be honest, we can't control most of what happens during the day. People get sick, meetings run late, news breaks, stress shows up. But when you've owned your morning, when you've centered yourself before the chaos begins, you don't get knocked around as easily. You respond instead of react. You speak from clarity instead of anxiety. You lead from groundedness instead of panic. And the people around you feel that. When leaders are calm, teams feel safe. When parents are present, children feel seen. When partners are intentional, relationships deepen. And it all starts not with a goal or a strategy or a life plan, but with a simple choice. How will I begin today? That's the power of a morning routine. It's not a productivity hack. It's a personal revolution. It's the quiet daily rebellion against a world that profits from your distraction. And it's your invitation to lead yourself before you lead anyone else. So tomorrow morning when your alarm goes off, don't ask, what do I have to do today? Ask instead, who do I want to be when the world meets me? And start there. Most people think a morning routine is about discipline, about waking up early, staying fit, eating right, and reading books while the world sleeps. And yes, those things are good, but they're not the reason. Because when you look closer, when you zoom out, you realize something deeper is going on. Your morning routine isn't just a habit. It's a signal. It's a quiet, powerful declaration of who you believe yourself to be. We often tell people what we value. We say things like, I care about my health, or I want to be more mindful, or I'm trying to be more organized. But what speaks louder than any of that is what we do when no one's watching, especially at the start of the day. That first hour is when you cast your vote, not just for how the day will go, but for the kind of person you are becoming. Think about it, when the world is still asleep, when the inbox is still quiet, when your phone hasn't started lighting up with demands, that's the most honest moment of your entire day. You're not performing for anyone, you're not responding to anything, it's just you. And whatever you choose to do at that moment reveals what matters to you most. I remember meeting a young executive once, we'll call her Mia. She was sharp, driven, the kind of person whose energy filled a room. But behind the charisma, there was this chronic exhaustion in her eyes. She was running hard, always on, always performing. One day, during a leadership offsite, she shared something that stayed with me. She said, every day I wake up and immediately check my phone. Emails, messages, news. And before I've even brushed my teeth, I already feel behind. She paused, then said something even more honest. I think I've built my life to look successful, but I don't know who I am when it's quiet. That was the moment it hit her. She wasn't lacking productivity. She was lacking identity. She had outsourced her sense of self to the world's expectations. And her mornings, those first moments of her day, reflected it perfectly. They weren't filled with intention, they were filled with reaction. We talked for a while after that. And she'd made one small change, not a dramatic overhaul, just one thing. Every morning before checking her phone, she wrote one sentence. Today, I will show up as someone who values ... And she filled in the blank. Courage, kindness, focus, stillness, whatever felt true. Took her less than a minute. But that one sentence changed how she walked into the rest of the day, because it reminded her of something so many of us forget. We are not what we do. We are who we choose to be while we're doing it. Your morning routine is your first act of identity. And identity isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in small, consistent choices. If you start your morning grounded, reflective, and intentional, that's who you're becoming. Someone who leads from within, not from urgency. There's something sacred about the small rituals we create. Lighting a candle, sitting in silence, making your bed with care, preparing breakfast without rushing. These things don't seem big, but they are, because they say, I'm worth showing up for. And they become anchors, symbols, a way of saying, this is who I am, even when no one else is watching. Think of it like this. Every morning you get a blank canvas, and the first brush strokes define the tone, the energy, the style of what follows. If you start with chaos, the painting becomes reactive. But if you start with clarity, with purpose, with care, the rest of the day begins to follow that shape. And it's not just about how you feel, it's about how you show up for others. Because when your actions match your values, people trust you. They feel it. They sense that you're not just performing, you're grounded. You're not just efficient, you're intentional. And that creates influence. Not the kind that comes from a title, but the kind that comes from character. I once asked a group of leaders, what do you stand for? And everyone gave answers: integrity, courage, empathy. But then I asked, what's the first thing you did this morning? And the answers told a different story. Most people said they scrolled their phone, replied to emails, or rushed into meetings. Now, there's no judgment here, we're all human, but there's a gap between what we say we value and what we practice when no one's looking. And the thing about that gap, over time, it erodes confidence, not in others, in ourselves. When our behavior doesn't align with our beliefs, we feel it. We feel out of sync. But when our morning actions reflect who we say we are, we begin to trust ourselves again. And that trust is the root of everything: leadership, creativity, love, resilience. It all starts with self-trust. You don't have to overhaul your life. You don't need to join a 5 a.m. club. You just need to pay attention to the message you're sending yourself every morning, because that message matters. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. Ask yourself, what does my morning say about what I believe, who I am, what I'm building? And if the answer doesn't reflect the person you want to be, good news. Tomorrow is a brand new canvas. You get to choose again. You get to act on purpose. You get to speak your values through small actions. You get to declare through the quiet rhythm of your routine, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. And when you do that enough times, something shifts. You stop chasing identity. You start living it. Most people are waiting for motivation to show up before they begin. They think they need to feel inspired, driven, fully energized, and ready before they can take the first step. But here's the truth: motivation doesn't come first, action does. And not just any action. Intentional, meaningful action. The kind that sends a signal to your brain that you're already in motion. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be small, simple, clear, because the brain doesn't need grand achievements to feel like it's winning. It just needs proof that something has started, that progress is real, that momentum is possible. And this is where your morning routine becomes so powerful. The way you begin your day, the very first things you do becomes evidence. It tells your brain, we're not stuck, we're not behind, we're moving. And that feeling, that momentum, fuels everything that follows. I met a coach once who worked with Olympic athletes. He said something that changed how I think about mornings. We never start training at full speed, he told me. We start with rhythm, with pattern, with breath. Because if you get that right, performance follows. The same principle applies to our lives. Most of us try to launch into our day at full speed, emails, meetings, deadlines. But if you start your day by reacting, you're not grounded, you're just bracing. And when you live in a state of bracing, you burn out quickly. But when you begin with rhythm, a few small, clear wins, you're telling your nervous system, we're safe, we're capable, we've got this. And you begin to build from there. Here's what I mean by small wins. It could be as simple as making your bed, taking a cold shower, drinking a glass of water, writing a few lines in a journal, moving your body for 5 minutes. Something that reminds you, I made a promise to myself, and I kept it. This isn't about checking a box. It's about building trust with yourself, and that trust is the fuel for motivation. You don't need to feel amazing to begin. You need to begin to feel amazing. That's where most people get it backwards. They say, I'll start journaling when I feel more focused, or I'll go for a walk when I feel more motivated. But neuroscience tells a different story. The brain doesn't create motivation in a vacuum. It creates motivation from progress, from evidence, from motion. It's like pushing a car that's stuck in neutral. At first, it takes everything you've got, but once it starts to roll even a little, the resistance lessens. You're still pushing, but now the car is helping you. Momentum makes the work easier. I remember working with a founder who had built a wildly successful company. From the outside, he looked like the picture of motivation, but he confessed something surprising. He said, there are a lot of mornings I wake up and feel empty. like there's nothing in the tank. So I asked him, what do you do when that happens? He smiled and said, I lace my shoes and walk around the block. Just once. That's it. Even if I don't want to. Then he paused. And 9 times out of 10, by the time I'm back at my front door, something has shifted. Not everything, but enough. It wasn't about the walk. It was about what the walk represented. Motion, proof that the day had started. That he wasn't waiting around for inspiration. He was stepping into it. That's the secret most people miss. Motivation isn't a lightning strike. It's a spark. And you create this spark by moving. You can apply this idea to anything. Health, creativity, leadership, relationships. Small intentional actions at the start of your day build confidence, not because they fix everything, but because they remind you that you are not powerless. Let's be honest, there are mornings when life feels heavy. The weight of responsibilities, the uncertainty of the future, the noise of the world. And in those moments, it's easy to believe that doing one small thing won't matter, but it does. Because that small thing carries something bigger with it. Proof that you still have agency, that you still get to decide what kind of day this will be. I think of a client I worked with during a difficult season of grief. Every morning, she wrote one sentence in a notebook, just one. Some days it was hopeful, some days it was angry, some days it was tired, but she did it anyway. One sentence. That was her win. That was her motion. And it pulled her through. You don't need a perfectly structured routine. You don't need to wake up at dawn and run a marathon, but you do need to move intentionally. You need to show your brain, we've started. Because once you start, everything changes. Small wins build momentum. Momentum builds motivation, and motivation builds consistency. This is what separates people who lead from people who chase. Leaders don't wait to feel ready. They act on purpose and let readiness catch up. So here's the question. What's your first win tomorrow morning? Not your 10th, not your peak performance moment, just the first thing you'll do to tell yourself we're in motion. It doesn't have to impress anyone, it just has to be yours. Because once you stack that first win, then another, and then another, you begin to walk into your day with a sense of self-respect. And that self-respect, more than any external praise, becomes your engine. And when that engine starts, it's hard to stop. You don't need more time. You don't need more energy. You just need to begin. And there's this idea floating around that success is about feeling inspired all the time. That great leaders, high performers, purpose-driven people wake up every morning with fire in their belly, ready to conquer the world. But that's not how it works, not even close. The truth is, even the most driven people have off days. Days when motivation is nowhere to be found. Days when the alarm goes off and every cell in their body says, not today. And that's why motivation by itself is unreliable, it's emotional, it fluctuates, it gets thrown around by sleep, stress, news, fear, life. And if the only thing you're counting on to move you forward is a feeling, then you're in trouble. Because when that feeling disappears, so does your progress. Think about the morning. That first hour of your day, it's fragile. It can tip in any direction. A single notification can throw you off course. One bad night's sleep can drain your energy. One anxious thought can pull you into a spiral. And yet, if you have a system, a routine, then no matter what's swirling around you, you have a foundation. I once spoke with a Navy SEAL who said something that stuck with me. We don't rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our training. He wasn't talking about combat. He was talking about life, about pressure, about being ready, not in a flashy way, but in a reliable way. And that's what a morning routine is. It's your training, not for emergencies, but for everyday life. And here's the thing. It doesn't need to be complicated. A good routine isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters and doing it with consistency. It's not about squeezing productivity out of every minute. It's about setting an emotional and mental baseline so when the day starts throwing things at you, and it will, you're not scrambling. You're anchored. I think of it like a pilot doing a pre-flight checklist. They don't do it because they're unsure. They do it because the stakes are high. Because even with experience, the system protects them from oversight, from stress, from human error. And you too are flying a high-stakes mission. Your life, your career, your family, your vision. The way you begin each day matters more than you think. Here's the hard truth. Discipline will carry you when motivation won't. And discipline doesn't have to be loud or aggressive. It can be quiet, gentle, a whisper in the morning that says, this is what we do. That's the kind of discipline that sustains. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that supports. I worked with a client, a creative, a designer, who struggled with inconsistency. His work was brilliant, but his output was erratic. When he was motivated, he could create magic, but when he wasn't, nothing. Weeks of nothing. And that unpredictability started to bleed into his confidence. So we didn't start with productivity tools or motivational talks. We started with one question. What's the smallest repeatable action you can take every morning that aligns with the kind of person you want to be? Not the most impressive, the most repeatable. He said, I could sit at my desk at 8 a.m. with a cup of coffee, no pressure to create, just be there. That became his system. That was his safety net. Rain or shine, inspired or not, he sat at his desk. And you know what happened? Over time, creativity started showing up more often, not less. Because he'd created a space for it, not when he felt like it, every day. That's what systems do. They create rhythm, they create expectation, and most importantly, they give you something to fall back on when life feels heavy. Your morning routine doesn't have to be impressive. It just has to be there. Something you can rely on. Something that doesn't ask how you feel, but simply reminds you you've been here before. You know how to begin. And that kind of stability creates freedom, because when you know how to start, no matter what the day brings, you're not afraid of uncertainty. You're not frozen by overwhelm. You have a place to return to. I want to be clear, this isn't about being robotic. It's about being resilient. A good system frees you. It gives you space to feel tired, to feel uninspired, to feel human without losing your footing. Imagine standing on a narrow beam. Every little wobble throws you off. But if you widen the beam, if you create a solid base, you can handle more. You can bend without breaking. Your morning routine is that wider beam, that base. So don't wait for motivation. Build systems. Build them when you feel strong so they can catch you when you don't. And let your morning routine be the first one, not because it will make you better at everything else, although it will, as you don't know where that end is going to be. But because it gives you something even more powerful, a place to land, a way to start, and a reminder that no matter how unpredictable life gets, you are not starting from zero, you are starting from purpose. Every day, leadership doesn't start in the boardroom. It doesn't start with strategy decks, team meetings, or big decisions. Leadership begins before anyone sees you, before the emails, before the calls, before the expectations start stacking up. It begins in the morning, in the quiet moments where no one is looking. Because how you lead others is directly tied to how you lead yourself. And that self-leadership starts the second you open your eyes. We talk about leadership as a skill, communication, vision, decisiveness, and all of that is true, but underneath all of that is something far more subtle, far more foundational: presence. A leader who is not present, who is rushed, scattered, reactive, doesn't inspire trust. Not because they're unqualified, but because their energy says, I'm not here with you, I'm trying to keep up with something else. And where's presence come from? It's not a switch you flip when you walk into a meeting. It's cultivated, and it starts in the morning. The quality of your morning determines how you walk into your day. And how you walk into your day is how people experience you, not just as a professional, but as a person. I remember speaking with a founder who led a team of 80 people. Talented, respected, driven, the kind of person others naturally looked to for direction. But she told me something that caught me off guard. I realized I was bringing my chaos into every room. I wasn't just leading the meetings, I was infecting them. My stress was setting the tone for everyone else. And then she said something even more powerful. The problem wasn't my schedule. It was how I was starting my day. I was waking up already in defense mode, scrolling my phone, skipping breakfast, rushing into back-to-back calls, no breath, no clarity, just reacting. That's not leadership, that's survival. So she made a change, not a big dramatic overhaul, just a decision to take the first 20 minutes of every morning for herself. No phone, no laptop, just breath, movement, stillness, and one clear question: how do I want to show up today? Changed everything, not just for her team. Meetings became calmer, decisions became clearer, tension began to drop. Why? Because the person walking into the room wasn't frantic, she was grounded. And that grounding rippled outward. That's what leadership is, not command, not control, energy. And your morning is where that energy gets shaped. There's a myth that leadership is about always being on, always available, always decisive. But real leadership, the kind that earns loyalty and drives culture, is about being intentional. It's about walking into rooms with clarity, not just confidence. And you can't have clarity if your mind is still catching up from the moment you woke up. Clarity isn't a byproduct of caffeine, it's a byproduct of alignment. And alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you carve out space to listen to yourself, to your body, to your intention. That's why your morning routine matters. It's not about optimization, it's about orientation. It's your internal compass, reminding you who you are before the world tries to tell you otherwise. Too many leaders wake up and step immediately into reaction. The phone buzzes, and they're already in the storm. But if the first voice you hear each day is the voice of urgency, you've already lost your center. And if you don't have a center, how can you be one for others? One of the most overlooked responsibilities of leadership is emotional regulation. Your team doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be anchored, to hold a steady state even when the work is hard. And that steadiness, it doesn't come from willpower, it comes from rhythm, from structure, from having a system, a morning ritual that nourishes you before the demands of leadership drain you. Think of it like this. You're the thermostat, not the thermometer. You don't just reflect the temperature of the room, you set it. And if you walk in already overheated, that's what everyone else will feel. But if you walk in with calm, clarity, and intention, people take their cue from that. They settle, they focus, they trust, and trust is the currency of leadership. I once worked with an executive who led a global team across 5 time zones. Her schedule was a maze, and yet she had this unmistakable presence. Calm, firm, and fully engaged. I asked her once how she stayed so composed. She said, "My mornings are non-negotiable. I don't schedule calls before 9. I don't read emails before. I've journaled and meditated, not because I'm trying to be some Zen master, but because my team deserves the best version of me. And I can't offer that if I'm scattered." That's the heart of it. Morning routines aren't about self-indulgence. They're about service. You show up for yourself so that you can better show up for others. And let's be honest, leadership is hard. People look to you for answers, for guidance, for stability. And they don't care how many hours you slept or how full your calendar is. They care about how you make them feel. Safe, seen, supported. And that energy, that capacity to hold others, it's born in the stillness of the morning, not the speed of your meeting. So if you want to lead better, don't start with your team, start with your morning. Before the world asks you for anything, ask yourself, what kind of energy do I want to bring today? What kind of leader do I want to be in every room I enter? Then build a routine that supports that intention. Because in the end, leadership isn't something you turn on when the day begins. It's something you prepare for before the day even starts. And when you do that, when you meet the morning with clarity, presence, and purpose, you don't just lead more effectively, you lead more authentically. And that's the kind of leadership the world is hungry for.